Now right here is the intake vent that brings air into the kiln. Now we're in the very back of the kiln. If you're facing it, we're in the back left corner. And this right here is about 2 foot from the back wall and about 18 inches off the floor. And it's going to be very close to the actual kiln unit to draw air into it to use for circulation. And this is just a basic little vent. It opens from the outside. It's kind of like a pop-up camper or a motor home vent. But I went ahead and I sealed around it with some high temperature silicone, and I also spray foamed it to death. I spray foamed everything in here. I've went through over 10 cans of spray foam so far. I bought 5 more the other day. But anyways, that's the intake vent right there. That's how air would come into the kiln. Opens from the outside. Pretty easy. Now they also offer some powered vents. You just push a button and they open up and close, but I'm going to be checking on this thing every day, so there's no real need to sit in the house and push a button to open that vent up. I can just walk down here and do it. Now right here on the right side of the door, if you're facing the kiln, this is the right side right here, and this is the other vent. Turn the camera so you can see it. I've also got it opened up right now, and this is the output vent. If you're running the kiln and your temperature's getting too hot too fast, or somewhere you don't want it to be, because if you run this thing too hot, and depending upon what kind of wood you got in here and the current moisture content of it, you could really damage the wood. You could prevent case hardening and honeycombing and a lot of stuff that could happen and stuff like this. And this right here is what helps you prevent that. So if the kiln is running too hot too soon or just too hot altogether, this little vent right here on the side, you can open it up and kind of get some of the hot air out and try to regulate that temperature a little bit. It's kind of like a manual thermostat. Instead of pushing your heat pump down to 70 when it's 85, you can just open up this vent right here and get a lot of the hot air out of here. So anyways, that's where we're at right now in the build, and what I'm going to do this evening is start putting the vapor barrier up. So this is our last layer of insulation. It's going to be covered completely, the ceiling and the walls, with a poly vapor barrier 6mm. Our final layer on top of the vapor barrier is more plywood. Now the main purpose for this plywood is not only just to cover the inside and something for the paint to adhere to, but is the main purpose is to protect all these layers of insulation. Because if you're bringing in slabs with a forklift or a skid steer or whatever you're bringing it in with, or by hand, you're going to be bumping the walls a little bit with that lumber sometimes. The chamber is going to be able to house 10.5 foot long pieces of lumber. That's the total length I'll be able to put in here. The total length is 11 feet. But 10.5 was a good tight fit. And you're going to be bumping these walls with lumber as you bring it in. And these plywood right here protects this insulation. This insulation is very fragile. The facing on it underneath this poly vapor, you can't see it, but the facing is real fragile on it and it tears very easily. I found that out while hanging it. Anytime I put something against the wall, it scraped it and took the face right off of it. That's the main purpose for the plywood, is just protect all your layers of insulation and all your hours of hard work to make sure the integrity of the chamber stays there. Now up here in the ceiling's the same thing. We have our faced insulation, we have our vapor barrier, then we have our plywood right here on the back. Now the way we're doing this, the wife came up with this idea. We was having a hard time getting that vapor barrier up there in one solid piece, so the sheets are like 20 by 30 or something like that. They're huge. And what we did, we cut each sheet of vapor barrier and attached it to each piece of plywood with some Gorilla Glue, and then that just made it a lot easier. You just screw the plywood in and the vapor barrier is already hung on it. Another important detail here was right here on these screws. I'm using some screws to attach the plywood to the walls. And after the screw goes in, we're going behind every one of them and putting some high temperature silicone over them. And that just prevents any air leaks where the screw goes in. And also on the joints where this plywood attaches to each other, we'll also run a bead of high temperature RTD silicone to seal that up. It's all about the seals on this thing. You want to seal up every crack there is. It's another example of what I'm talking about here with this insulation. The back wall is finished. It's covered in plywood, and now we're going to start on this wall here, which has got the vapor barrier over it. As you can see, while I talked about sealing up these joints right here, where all the plywood sheets meet together, is high temperature silicone. That just makes a real tight seal between these pieces of plywood. Yet another example here of how tedious this work is on the kiln. This is the last wall and we're finished with the kiln and we're ready for paint. And what I'm doing here, I put the vapor barrier on, And I'm sealing the vapor barrier to the insulation with this HVCA tape here around the hole for the vent. This is the outtake vent, so when the kiln gets too hot, this vent will open and let the hot air out. The reason I'm showing this is just another example of why this is a very tedious, time-taking endeavor here, building this kiln. You want to make sure your tape is sealed up tight to the vapor barrier that attaches to the insulation. And it's just an overall process here of being very meticulous and making sure you do a good job the first time. Because the very best advice that I took when I was doing my research for the past few months on this kiln was don't skin up on the insulation. Make sure you go overboard on it. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So if everything goes as planned today, we'll finish the inside of the chamber and be ready for the aluminum roofing paint that goes on the entire surface here.